everybody, and thank you for being here. It's brilliant. I hear this has grown a lot since last year, and that really excites me. But this isn't about me, this is mostly about them. And I'm just going to tease out some interesting information to find out a bit more about what it's like to develop accessible games from small indie studios. Let's just start with a bit of an introduction and a background. Just do the up and down, and then eventually we'll get a bit of a flow going on.
Alright, so my name is AJ Ryan. I am Able Gamers' fellow for 2016. I've been making small games for game jams that are also accessible to prove that games can be accessible in a short amount of time, in a game jam setting. So yeah, very cool with Able Gamers.
Cool. So my name is Henry Hoffman. I work for a little micro indie studio in London called Fiddlesticks. I've been making indie games professionally for 6 years or so. And the game that we released recently is called Hue, which is a colour-based puzzle platformer. And I didn't really know a huge amount about game accessibility before this game, but I was, due to our interesting mechanic that kind of relies on colour identification, I was kind of thrust into it. And because of that, I am now sort of knee-deep in making games more accessible.
Brilliant. Colby.
So, hi, I'm Nicole Stark. Yeah, just like Game of Thrones. My husband and I and our 4 daughters are the Partridge family of independent game development. We have a small studio based in Australia, and we've been around for 5 years now. We just released a game called Ninja Pizza Girl.
I'm Nathan Founts from Mommy's Best Games, and wow, I think this will be 10 years as an indie, and let's see, we did shoot one up a while ago, and that's when I started talking to Ian and some other people pushing accessibility, and it was a lot of fun. And it was a cool journey to make a shoot 'em up that was a one-button controlled game, and then we started digging into other kind of accessibility options, and from there, Serious Sam Double D and Explosion 8 and a bunch of other games that we did, I tried to put as much stuff in there as possible to make them accessible.
Fantastic. And do you have one, like it varies a lot obviously how difficult it can be to add accessibility to a game. What's your quickest, easiest, this is just a no-brainer, everyone should be doing this?
The easiest one that I like to put in every single game is gameplay speed control. Because if you factor in the time delta, which almost every game nowadays does, it's literally no brainer. You just put a slider in the options and then you put a modifier on the time delta. So you can have a game that goes at 10% speed, or you can have a game that goes at 200% speed, and then suddenly it's super hard. And a lot of hardcore games like that. So, and then I even take some of my own games and slow them down just a little bit, just to play them easier. So then it's easy for me.
Remappable controls. And if you don't do it, somebody is going to be harassing you going, I want to play this on my PlayStation 1 controller. So it helps me anyway.
Well, I was going to say remappable.
Okay.
But I guess subtitling for voiceover work, or any other sort of voice work you might have.
So does that cost much as well? I guess that's kind of moving into another area as to how much.
Subtitling.
Subtitling.
Subtitling can be very simple. It depends what game engine you're using to develop your game, but most game engines now like Unreal and Unity have really advanced UI stuff, which means that adding in subtitles is really as trivial as a few lines of code in an XML spreadsheet or something along those lines.
So I would say variables on the player that allow for maybe infinite health or a lot of health, so you can go through the game easier without, you can take more hits or things like that.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just a variable on your health, right? You're just extending that, so it's not that hard to add, and it can really make a game a lot easier for someone just to see the end of the game.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. I guess I'm going to go to the other end of the spectrum now, and what's the thing that you struggle the most with trying to make your game accessible with, no doubt, limited resources and people, because you're all from small indie studios?
So for me, I would say, just in general, audio, I think, is really difficult to get right. I feel like in most games I play, the audio mix, feels a little off, but being, just trying to do good audio in a game jam, especially since I don't develop the audio myself, is very difficult to get right and, really feel good, just wearing headphones and a variety of audio setups. It's something I'm still working on getting, perfect.
So something that we did, coming back to remappable controls, is when you've got a gamepad and then you've got a mouse, I think there's fairly traditional input methods. There's button pressing and things like that. But if you're using an analog stick and you're doing sort of gestures that you might replicate with a mouse, suddenly remapping that becomes very complicated. Because if you're trying to remap a mouse gesture to a keyboard or remap a sort of an analog stick to a button, suddenly that doesn't work quite as well. And then you have to try and think of where that's going to be remapped to, how that's going to be remapped to. And that took a lot of research and sort of time investment on our part. So that became quite complicated.
So the biggest problem we found is as soon as you unlock something, you have to create UI for it. So it just becomes like a lot of things are, brightness, contrast, they're easy to unlock, but then you end up with these massive options pages that take days to get working, and it's all just time, really.
To add to that as well, if you are adding controller and multiple input support as well, suddenly all that extra UI then has to work with those extra input methods as well. So that kind of multiplies the work.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble if I start trying to sort of shoot for favourites in either engines or consoles. I love you all. You can all learn. It's okay. I don't know how to do it. Do you have a preferred platform for developing your most accessible games? This could also be a stupid question. I know a fair amount of accessibility, but I don't actually have it for it. But that's why I like asking questions. Learning.
I mean, in a way, I like working on a single console for the same reason that making the remapping can get really complicated. If you know that there's one controller that they're using, you don't have to do mouse and keyboard, just mouse, just keyboard. All the controllers for Steam. So Steam takes a long time to do work for it. But yeah, I think I like just working on one console.
I'm just going to, it's kind of related. We play a lot of Overwatch in my house. And I play on PS4. And I know I've only been vaguely seeing some things about talking about the fact that you can map keyboards to PlayStation. So does that affect what you're talking about there? And if I'm completely wrong, just let me know.
I haven't had perfect working pieces from those kind of secondary software. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't be certain of what
You
somebody's.
can do it if you please it. Yeah.
If somebody gets it working, it's great. That's great. But sometimes they're complaining it's not working, and so I just like to do it in my game software.
Has anyone else got a favourite, like which engine or platform is just like, yeah, I can straight away tick off that I've got hell blindness and motor skills and
So we made our game in Unity, and I'm a big Unity fan. But I started using Unreal recently, and the ease of which you can add rebindable controls is sort of unparalleled compared to Unity. A lot of that stuff is built in by default, and it becomes a lot easier to rebind all sorts of controls across all sorts of platforms. Whereas with Unity, we're kind of reliant on third-party plugins at the moment. Their input system is fairly underdeveloped. I know they're working on a new one at the moment, but that's not available yet. So I think probably in a few years there'll be a level playing field. But at the moment, Unreal is really good for sort of input remapping.
Is there if any of the engines made a big announcement about some accessibility step forward this week, being GDC, and that could well be the case, what would you like to see the most? Well, maybe it's that, but
I would just love it if they could take a template from Able Gamers or whatnot and just make it the default to have all those options exposed inside an engine. It would just be incredible. 20, 30 options, it'd just be great. And then everybody would take it, and then everybody would just say, oh, at a minimum, we have all of these options available. So if an engine took it over, it would really push it forward to everybody.
Can Can I change your question slightly?
Sure.
So instead of engines, platforms. So something I would like to see, so we've gone through the certification process on Xbox One, PS4, PS Vita, and it's long and it's arduous, and there's a lot of things that maybe seem arbitrary in certain conditions, but there's no real sort of accessibility minimum baseline. I mean, it'd be really great if they were like, there needs to be reliable controls on console, there needs to be all this stuff. And then they would set a complete standard that everyone would adhere to. And people that make cross-platform games, if they're making them on console, those features will carry across to PC. And suddenly there'll be just a baseline that most of the mid-tier and even lower-tier indies will kind of adhere to.
Even if it wasn't something that you needed to do, if it's something that you could do and get like a special tick or something, that would make a difference, I think.
And I would just add that if they can't add it to engine level, I think tutorials from some of the engine developers on maybe how to do rebinding or how to add certain accessibility features within their engine, just like they teach you the basics of the engine in general, would really help out a lot of new developers who I think are the future and would definitely push accessibility forward as we in the future.
Okay, fantastic. I just have a moment where I wonder what my next question will be. You guys should just chat amongst yourselves. Okay, here's a tricky one. I don't know how much you all know about what you've each been doing. What would you ask each other for advice on? Just being confusing, you know, sort of with that. Is it?
How do you guys connect with disabled gamers to help test your games and improve them? Because I have trouble with that all the time.
So you can, as I'm with Able Gamers as their fellow, but if you just email Able Gamers, you can start by contacting me, Steve, Greg, anyone over there. They have people that are willing to test your game with a variety of disabilities that can really help you figure out, what works, what doesn't. And I've tested games that way. They've tested games that way. And they know. Basically, they use includification as a benchmark for how accessible your game is.
I'm going to type that in my phone real quickly.
That's
Sorry.
it's obviously going to be really hard to test for all those different things and find the people who are willing to do that and with all the different requirements that they might have. Oh, that's interesting. I might end up throwing out to the audience, so just giving you fair warning there, people. Nicole, with Ninja Pete's Girl, just because I know it, I loved it. When did you start planning for accessibility, and did you manage to add more things later, or was it only the things that you've started? I think it's.
Yeah, that's actually, it's something you should plan for right at the beginning, and we didn't. But when we were doing our Kickstarter, we decided to have an includification stretch goal, and that's when we didn't quite reach it, but we decided to put everything in anyway. There's always more things you could do. I think there's some things that we like to have done. Our daughter goes to a local disability support group. That's where she likes to swim, and we would just take the game with us to swimming lessons, and some of the kids would like, "Can I try that?" So that's how we became interested in doing it.
And do they still play the game?
Yeah.
Yay! You're very special, I'm sure. Yeah, testing games each 10. I'm awesome. I might actually throw it out because I'm sure a lot. Yeah, there we go. Hands are up already. Let's try it this way. Yes.
So I apologize, I didn't catch your name.
Nathan.
Nathan?
So I heard you mention that it was great if there were engines would actually implement a set of controls that all games could adopt and pick up. But in the absence of that being done, what is the hardest thing you find to implement a game that you would want support for?
What is the hardest feature to implement in the game that we want support for from an engine level?
From an accessibility perspective, yes.
I think because of the multiplicative complications of renewability, I'd like you were saying, if we could have something like generic and super powerful where it's got analog stick support, button support, and everything almost built for any sort of control option, and you just sort of connect it to the button or stick or analog trigger or swipe. You know what I mean? If it was very generic and you just sort of build out this remappable system in almost like a flowchart way, if that was engine level, and so we're doing, our next game is a mess. It's in Unity, but it's using like a third-party remappable system. It doesn't even remap straight to PS4 controllers versus Xbox. It's like, come on. Why does it not do that? You know? So if it was able to do something like that and just take all these build commands through to every controller in a unified way, that would be incredible. Because it's so complicated. There's so many options to support that way. That's what would be great for me.
How about the rest of it?
What's that?
I said, how about the rest of it, in terms of hardest thing to implement?
So for engine level, it was, for us anyway, in this instance, it was only really remappable controls, because we found for colorblind support that we done, it was very specific to our type of game, so that needed to be a kind of a bespoke solution. It wasn't something that would easily work at an engine level that could cover sort of a lot of different types of games, I think. And the rest of the stuff was relatively straightforward. It was just something, it was more of a design challenge that we needed to identify early, and then we needed to design the rest of the game around that. Once we'd done that, it was relatively easy to implement. So yeah, I would just agree with you in terms of remappable controls.
It seems like remappable controls is something that everybody is wants
I
to
think
do.
we've got consensus here. It's fantastic. Yeah, down the front, Gemma.
I was wondering if you had any reflections on accessibility from India as a business kind of perspective. This kind of depends on your individual circumstances. But I'm finding out, I'm in a similar situation myself. I'm wrapping in accessibility as part of the business pitch. And I wonder if you could explain some of the feedback you've had from that.
So when we started developing our game, it's called Hue, and it's entirely built around colour and the identification of colour. And when we built a colourblind mode in, we thought it was just a fairly sort of standard way of getting more players to play the game. We didn't treat it as like a business decision. We certainly didn't think it was going to affect our reviews. But if you collate all our Metacritic reviews, nearly every single one mentions the fact that we support colourblindness. And I'm fairly confident that our entire Metacritic overall rating, because our game was so accessible, has been boosted because of it. So it's been critically well received because of the accessibility features that we included. And I think having a few Metacritic extra points is a very good reason to do it.
On the other side, we had an includification stretch goal in our Kickstarter, and we got a reasonable amount of press for that, you know. But people would say, "Oh, this is great! That's so great that you're doing that." But it's not something that would get people to spend money. So it's something that it can make people feel good about you, but not necessarily buy your product.
I think for our games, because they weren't essential, like Hue, it was action games with some accessibility features. We got good feelings now. I don't know if it helps sell more copies or not, but I sleep better at night.
For me, since I do game jams, a lot, if you go to itch.io, which is what most game jams are ran out of now, they actually have accessibility tags. So if you put an accessible feature in your game, there's a tag and a page specific to that feature. So people with disabilities that need a feature in order to enjoy a game, well, you can just tag it, and then those people can play, can find your game, play it, and have a good reaction to what you've done, because they can actually experience your game.
That's interesting. Do any of the other platforms have that? Like Steam, can I go, I want... That should work.
You have like user applied tags, and if it got enough upvotes, it would show up as a little extra thing. So
Right, but you can't preset it as this is made,
you can put your own
has
tags on.
controls, is colourblind friendly, can controls.
You can put your own tags on those. When you launch, when you put your game on Steam, it's
So,
they sort of get upvoted by users. I think that's
I like
the way it, yeah.
I mostly know about mobile consoles. I'm not very good at this because I'm terrible at PC games. Shh, don't tell everyone. We can't anymore. Yes.
I don't have a question, I was just hoping that you could repeat what you were saying.
All right, yes, make sure we're repeating the question. Sorry about that. I think that came through in the end in the answer and I had before. But okay, has anyone else got any questions they would like to ask? Yes, up back there.
So I'm interested in this panel because I'm a part of a two-person game company. I'm curious to know what happens when you run into an accessibility problem that's also a resource problem. Like how do you?
Right, so what happens when you run into an accessibility problem that is also a resource problem? As it's like, yes, I want to do all these things, there are two of us.
Cut it immediately.
That's the reality of it, yeah.
I mean, you balance where your heart is, I guess, and what you really want to support and what you don't. But I don't know of anything other than, I don't know what's so difficult to do.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, sorry.
So in terms of resource, we're talking about how much we can dedicate to a project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I talked earlier about making a business case for it, and there was a very strong business case in it for us. And when there's a strong business case and you're raising investment from either investors or publishers, which is what we did, they're very receptive to you dedicating that resource to that. As long as you can make a business case, you can make a personal case or a case to investors. But so the real challenge is making a business case.
And there's not anyone who will just like encourage you by, I'm not aware of Film Victoria or some funding body going, I'll give you bonus funding body if you make sure it's accessible too. They should do that too. Let's try my list down over here. We're going to time. Oh, I've still got a few more minutes. Does anyone else have a yes?
So Colin from Persuasion Gaming Studios, any tips and tricks on how you test those features with an accessible feature?
Yeah.
How would you test it?
So tips and tricks for testing your accessible features. I know we have to get in touch with Able Gamers because they have all these wonderful people who will help you. Any
I mean,
other?
the best way to test it was in person. So if that's also the hardest way to test, I guess, is to get people in your office and test with them. Yeah, people just don't give good feedback over email. Usually, it's awful.
So I guess it's a question of resource as well, how much time you dedicate to testing. So when at the very beginning when we started, we simply went through sort of various subreddits on Reddit dedicated to groups that suffer from various disabilities. There's a really active colorblind subreddit and they're really receptive to games and doing testing on your behalf and all this sort of thing. But the real value that we got, so we had to, as part of our sort of promotional campaign, we had to go to 50 different events all over the world showcasing the game. And those showcasing events sort of generally were our user testing. And we would do sort of, we would say that our game, we think that we've got a colorblind mode that works, and people that are colorblind would come by, swing by and test our game. People were super receptive to that. And that works really well for us because it's in person, we can discuss various problems, and they can propose potential solutions as well, which was really valuable.
Can you use Skype or like video calls as a way around living in Australia, for example? I'm allowed to say that I'm from there too. You know what I mean? Like if you haven't got that, or like you're a remote developer, so you don't necessarily have a pool of, particularly if you're looking at multiple accessibility options. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I probably should stop.
We just use email. It's not perfect, but it's better than.
People never tell me. They just don't tell me stuff. I'll just say like, "How was that level?" And they're like, "It's great." I love it. And then meanwhile, like you watch. You guys, I know I'm sure a lot of you had this testing experience before. You watch someone play a level, and they'll be terrible at it, and they'll take like 15 minutes, and they're only supposed to take like 3 minutes. And at the end, you'll just say, you gotta keep a poker face. You know, how was that? I'm like, it was great. It's so awful, you know, to watch them do that. So you never get that through an email, you know what I mean? You wouldn't get all the, what was going wrong in it, you know, so.
I find if you give people an opening to complain, they're writing it.
Touche.
Okay, do we, yeah, oh,
Have you ever chosen not to tackle a specific genre or a specific game you had in mind because the complexities of the mechanics would seem too challenging to make accessible?
okay, I'm going to do my best, okay? And is there ever been a specific genre or game that you've decided not to do because the accessibility requirements to make it more accessible were just too hardcore?
I would say, like, during game jams at least, I stray away from local multiplayer games simply because it's hard to get a really even, fair playing field with all the accessibility features you might want to add. It's very hard to balance in 2 days. I mean, it's not bad to balance in a week or a month, but you know, in a couple days, it's really hard to get a competitive game that also has all the accessibility features I expect from whatever I make.
I think if a game is too hardcore to make accessible anyway, it's probably too hardcore for me to program.
Yeah, I would stay away from anything competitive, like in the moment competitive.
We had several dual stick games, and prior to those, we were doing one stick and an action button game, or a single shooting games. A stick with a button that shoots, and then we went on to like some dual stick games. And I couldn't get one button working for those, one switch. It was just too much. So I tried to put like background intensity and gameplay speed and other things in as much as I could, but yeah, the one stick controls were too complicated. It's a lot.
I think that's, I'm actually just speaking on the Desert Watch. Struggling to read it a little bit, but I think we've still got time for a couple more questions. I'll start here, I'll come back to you in a moment.
So what about opening up your game for users to modify it and put some accessibility features? So let's say you may not have bandwidth, but if someone walks in and is like, hey, I will totally add some files to your game, or I will try to make a mod that will do something to make it better.
Right, so has anyone considered using the mod community to add accessible features to their games? That's a great idea.
It is a great.
Writing that one down too.
I don't know how to do I've never done the mod thing for our games. The closest I've gotten is level editor, so I think it's a good idea to plug in style stuff.
I guess that's maybe something that engine developers can encourage as well, because that's the main reason, sort of, when I'm building a Unity game, it's very difficult to make that moddable. If I was building an Unreal game, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. So if those sort of moddable features were implemented engine side, then I think it would make it a lot easier for people to be able to contribute, that sort of thing. And that kind of thing happens a lot with localization. So if you don't support certain languages, many people are very willing to sort of translate your game into other languages. I see no reason why that couldn't work with game accessibility features. I think it's a pretty good idea.
Yes.
So Nathan, targeting questions at you. You brought up the point about adding simplified game mechanics or changing the speed, I think is one of the things recommended. How do you think about that when it relates to multiplayer games? How can you have a competitive game if you're adjusting?
Okay, so I hate online multiplayer games as a person, but so I can't speak to that completely because I'm just not naturally inclined to do it. But I will say this: for some of our games that had accessibility options and had online leaderboards, so it wasn't like competitive online modes, but it was online leaderboards. What I did to try to appeal to both sides was the hardcore group and the disabled group was, I had the accessibility options, but as soon as you turn them on, I locked out the leaderboards. because it's like, you can't have some, you know, the gameplay speed thing, you can make the game super easy. So what if you're like a hardcore guy and you're just cheating the leaderboards, basically, is why I like it like that. So that was my kind of easy fix, was just to say, it had to be default settings for certain leaderboards to work. So, but online action stuff I didn't get into.
So bouncing off what he said, I haven't done this yet, but I was considering in the Game Jam game I made to tie maybe game speed into your final score. So say if you're playing at 10% speed, that would, you know, it'd multiply your final score by just 10%, and that would be what's posted on the leaderboards. And then conversely, if you're playing at double speed, maybe we double your score also posted on the leaderboards. I don't know, I mean, that might be a little too simple for, you know, leaderboard support, but, you know, I think even, you know, everyone wants to be on the leaderboard. So I think figuring something like that out, you know, doing the math on that would be pretty cool to figure out.
Excellent. I've got so many tips to go home with now. Thank you very much to this wonderful panel full of clever people, and questions from the audience, much appreciated. I think everyone will still be around for a bit of a chat. If you've got any other questions you'd like to take off the stage. Thank you kindly. It's been lovely to chat with you all.